Welcome to the Heart Exposed podcast, where we tackle heart issues and I share some lessons I've learned along the way. My name is Jake Jaderston, and I am the host of this podcast. And today we're going to talk about basketball and specifically being a fan of basketball. See, this is near and dear to my heart because I grew up with a dad who was a basketball coach, lived my whole life in a gym, and then I married a basketball coach. And I have just noticed some things about being a fan that are maybe a little worrisome. So today for the podcast, I also brought on my son, Jake Jaderston. Hi, Jake.
What's up?
Jake, he grew up like I did with a dad as a basketball coach. He also was a basketball player, played all the way through college. And now he and his wife, Carissa, and their little son, who's 4 months old, Luca, are missionaries in Taiwan, and Jake uses basketball to share the gospel. So thanks for joining us, Jake. Just to start out, I was thinking about what if someone went into a basketball game for the first time? They've never been there before. And they looked at the fans. You know, what would that look like to them? Like, I'm thinking they walk into this gymnasium. There's people like sitting on either sides of the court. They're dressed alike. I wore my t-shirt today just to rep the Falcons. But what do you think? What would that feel like for the first time you walk into a gym?
If you went to like a live college basketball game and you had virtually no sports experience, I think you might be walking into a situation where you think like you're at a cult or something because everyone's wearing matching outfits. They're screaming, like fans get so into it before the game even starts. They're like yelling chants and all sorts of things. And what's crazy about sports and basketball is you can be just yelling for other people to fail. Like you can be
Yes.
cheering against teams, which is just so inappropriate in any other state of our culture. But in this little fantasy world of sports, you're totally allowed to just go nuts, and it's celebrated as a fun thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's like this community aspect too, right? Where everyone just joins together and like you're saying with the chanting and who cares what you're saying because you're at a basketball game. You could say whatever you want. Before we get into some of that too, I wanted to just talk about the positive aspects. I was thinking how, we're created in God's image and God created these amazing athletes like that can do incredible things. And I think there is a positive there, right? That can be celebrated.
Yeah, I think there's personally maybe as many positives as drawbacks. I think that one of the things you see with sports or with basketball fandom is there's a group of people who basically give their allegiance to their team of choice. And they're part of something that's beyond themselves. If I'm a fan of the Minnesota Timberwolves and I have no impact on whether they win or lose a basketball game, but I feel it's my duty to watch them every time I can. I feel the sense of like I owe it to them, even though it has no impact on the game. And based on how they do, based on how well they play, if they win or lose, I have so much vested interest in this collective thing on how they do, which is just such a fascinating thing because I have no impact on it. And in reality, it's I'm not accomplishing anything if they win. I
Wow.
contributed nothing to that. So it is really this thing where you're looking beyond yourself into this kind of collective agreement that I've given my allegiance to them. So much of my happiness today is going to be dependent on how they do over these next 2 hours. If they can throw this little orange ball into the hoop.
Oh my goodness, that is so true. So it's okay. I mean, I think it's okay and good to have fun at a game and love a sport, but it's really about how our love is ordered, right? It's when we have disordered love that it starts to get messed up. And I can see how that can easily happen as a fan or has happened in my life at least as a fan of basketball and it like unintentionally being formed even as a person. Do you see that too?
Totally. Probably the most, I mean, so I live in Taiwan and here there are all sorts of superstitions that are integrated into society. But in the West, probably the place I saw superstition the most was with sports. It's so funny. I don't believe in them at all, but our grandpa had this saying, I'm not superstitious, but just in case. And it's like a small example, but I almost feel like there are ways where like you know, like I want to win a basketball game. I'm going to make sure I do my morning devo. Um, and that's a great thing to do, but there's like a subconscious part of me that thinks I'll be, rewarded by God by getting a win in the game, or um, little superstitious things. Where do I put my shoes? Things like that. That's one small way I felt like it can kind of like shape how you think subconsciously.
Oh my gosh, that is so true. I mean, I I remember there have been times, and I hate to even admit this, where I would and it would be sitting by grandpa, my dad, but if you sit this way a little bit, we were playing better, just silly
Oh,
things. And a
totally.
strong
Yeah.
believer. And it's like, that has no impact, like you said, on the game, but somehow this has gotten into my body. I mean, we're learning a lot about kind of liturgies and how liturgies aren't just church, but they just happen in life. So, and it's as you do these practices over and over again, it kind of gets into your body. And I was thinking about myself at a game. Okay, I get in there, I sit there, they do the national anthem. We all stand together, put our hands, some people put their hands over their heart. We all say it, or they sing it. And then we score a basket. We all jump up and cheer, raise my hand. I mean, how many times are my hands raised in the air? And then if something bad happens, I'm just down and my hands are, my head is in my hands. And a lot of the things that I do physically in a game, I could actually see doing in a church service. And
Totally. I mean,
how does that impact you, do you think?
yeah, no, it's fascinating. I think it might be uh very revealing of where you're at. Like I'm more demonstrative at a basketball game a lot of times than I feel comfortable being at church. Which probably shares something about how my heart sometimes is ordered. But yeah, I'm not sure. Like, is it that because I'm a part of this liturgy of going through the routines as a fan of, like you said, the national anthem, the cheering, the standing up, does that make it so that our like love for this team grows and grows, or is it we do these things because we have a love for the team? And I
Mm,
think they're probably synergistically connected, where both happen. Like you're going to cheer more because you care about them winning or losing, but you care about them winning or losing more because the liturgy of doing all that shapes your priorities. So we've created this atmosphere that draws you in to invest you're so heavily into how these guys do it, this game made for kids.
yeah. Oh, that's so good. And it brings me back to what you were talking about before when you're when you're in the environment of the game and after sometimes how you can look like at a player on the other team almost like they're not human and say things that are really unkind, like even just yelling airball or whatever. And I was thinking about you as a player. How have you experienced the fans? What's that been like for you, both positive and negatively?
Yeah, so there's kind of a difference between opposing fans and fans that are for you. I would hear all sorts of trash talk from opposing fans. They love to make fun of the fact that I was the coach's son. I was also just like a little shrimp on the court compared to everyone else. So I'd hear all sorts of trash talk, which honestly had very little impact on me. If I feel like I could compartmentalize, like with sports, sometimes you could make it. This is this little fantasy world, kind of like
Yeah.
they're saying things to me that outside of the game would really bother me, but fans never after the game were like rude or anything. It was during that game, and it kind of like honestly made me want to play better.
Yeah.
um but I could see it being different, and I think as a fan, like you said, sometimes you can view the other team rather than like an opponent as like the enemy, and you can say things pretty callously. But so I didn't feel as much of an impact from opposing fans. But one of the things as a player that was always told to me as advice was to not listen to your fans.
Sure.
Because if fans would tell me that like they loved watching me play, they were cheering for us, that was great. That gave me motivation. I want to, honor them by giving it my all. But when fans would say things like, "Oh, you should get more shots," or "Coach should give you the ball more," they think they're encouraging me, but really that's just kind of fueling my ego, where
Yeah.
as a team the whole point is to like sacrifice for the collective. The point isn't to make me look good, it's for me to do my part so that we can succeed. And whether fans were on would say bad things about me, which happened all the time too, um or they would say good things about any one of those would take my eyes off of what was important for our team to do well and would
Yeah.
lead to selfishness or bitterness. Um, and so, really, I would say that fans that just showed you appreciation and respect, that was so encouraging. But whenever they would kind of cross that line into either too much praise or criticism, that is one of the hardest things as a player to deal with.
So, so good, Jake. One of the things we've been learning about too is that we're formed by what we ultimately love, and what we ultimately love forms us. And there's an aim. And I was just thinking about this in the basketball fan culture. Like, what is that love being aimed at? Do you think? Do you think is it the player? Is it the team? Is it somehow make me a better person if my team wins? Is it a pride thing? Like that's where it's there, but it's what is the goal? What's the true love?
I think the answer changes based on different fans. Basketball is unique in that it has more fans of individual players than a lot of other team sports. Um, I think at its best, it becomes a lot more about a team giving its all and like achieving more than the sum of their parts, which I think is a noble thing.
Mhm.
Uh, One of my favorite basketball seasons from the Timberwolves was a couple of years ago, and it wasn't one of our best years, but we did so much better than everybody thought. And it's because they played hard together. They really sacrificed so that they were all playing in the right roles. And I look at that season as a fan, and why it brings me so much joy is the journey we went on and feeling like this team was embodying values that I respect. You know, they're
Yeah.
playing hard, they were unselfish. And so I think at its best, the win isn't simple wins and losses. And it's not just being the best. It's like being an honorable group that you care for. Um, at its worst, though, it can be just wanting to vicariously dominate others through getting wins. So, I mean, there's paths to both, but I definitely feel like I've experienced both of those, and it doesn't have to be this toxic thing.
Yeah, I totally agree with you on that. I think one thing personally that I've been wrestling with is how I get so into a game, and you've seen me, Jake. Like I will literally physically be shaking, like my hands will be shaking that I'll be so nervous. I want us to win so bad. And then the outcome of the game will probably have too much will just mean too much to me. I'll be feeling bad for your dad, or he'll be down, or be so excited, but it's all, even when we win, it's all fleeting. It doesn't last.
Mm.
It's exciting.
Mm.
You're in the moment. That's all great. But then that goes away until the next game. And how does a person like enjoy the game, but not get so invested like I have been, where it just impacts how I feel for days? Like that seems really wrong to me that it should impact me that much. And yeah, I honestly, it's something that I constantly wrestle with.
Yeah, well, you might be asking advice from the wrong person. I remember when I was really little, you had to lie to me and
That's
tell us
true.
that we won every game, or else I would just sob and lose it.
That's true.
So I've really, honestly, I have a story of trying to kind of curb that competitive, like that maniacal competitiveness in me. But I don't think you can just like flip a switch. And
Right.
I do think it's okay to care because you care because you love your husband
Yeah.
and you see how hard he works, how much he cares for his team, and that impacts how you feel about how they do. You genuinely love all the girls on his team.
Yeah.
And so I don't think you need to feel guilty for being invested. I I think that there are ways that you can come to God and ask him to um to process the importance of that game and of those people while also acknowledging it's a game and the outcome of it doesn't determine like the worth of these individuals. Not that you think it determines their worth, but there's still value and what they're doing, even if they don't reach the goal they may have set for themselves. But I don't know if you can just flip a switch. It's probably
Right.
something more innate. Like you're invested in all these, like you said, liturgies. And so you're going to care as long as you're in that environment, I think, to a certain degree. Um, Trying to make that healthy, I think, is a process of just different spiritual disciplines and asking God for his help.
Oh yeah, that's so, so good. And it really does come down to just the order of your loves, right? And having when that gets out of whack. And I think sometimes even just being aware, like awareness is the first step. And then um reorienting my heart to God. I like what you're saying too. Yeah, and just talking to him about it. I used to pray games a lot. Like help us win. And I've switched my prayers. Um, but I because I, that's the whole thing. Well, whichever side has most people praying, it doesn't work like that. That's not how God works. But I know he's with me and I can still, ask him, hey, just help me to calm down or help the girls to play their best. I think that's an okay
Mm.
prayer too. Um, I wanted anything else that you want to say, maybe even about I'm curious about Taiwan, sorry, fan culture because you kind of said it's a little different there. Like, do they get like we do? Like, do they get in fights? Do they get yell things? Is it kind of the same globally or is it a little bit different?
There are notable differences. They care, they're invested, but one of the biggest differences. So the first professional basketball game I went to here was completely different than what I described earlier. If you were to go to a basketball game, I was shocked because they wanted the home team to win. We wanted the Kaohsiung team to win, but the fans would cheer if they cheered an 8 level volume for their own team, they maybe cheered a 7 for the other team. The same people.
Wow.
So the opponents would score and they would clap. It was almost this way of just respecting people, like doing a good job at their craft. It was part of me like respects it and part of me is like suspicious of it. Like just because it's so countercultural to me. But it was very much a different atmosphere where I do think like they didn't view the opponent as the enemy in the same way that I do. Um, which I think is honorable. I don't know that they had the same kind of investment in their local team, so some of that changes it too. But they were just cheering for good basketball.
I mean, when you think about that, they were just there being entertained and enjoying it. And
Yeah,
the outcome
that's a
probably didn't make them either elated or sad for days, which is probably a really good thing. That's something, Jake. Wow. Oh, anything
yeah. It
else you'd like
was.
to? Oh, go ahead.
I would say it was just such a funny experience for someone who had such a radically different expectation.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Any other thoughts before we end? I have one story I'm going to end on, which I think kind of sums up a little bit about what we're talking about.
Yeah, I think I would just say, going back to what you were saying at the beginning, I know we've pointed out a lot of the ways that uh, there can be problems with our fandom, like having such a strong impact on our emotions. But I really do feel like there are a lot of lessons that I've learned about the kingdom of God through fandom.
Mhm.
I think that idea of being a part of something bigger than yourself and caring as a fan for something that you're not succeeding in or contributing to, I think there's a way that you can learn from that what it means to be a part of the kingdom of God and to submit to things that are beyond your control. And to be able to, one of the things that people say a lot is that sports build character. But a famous basketball coach, John Wooden, would say sports don't build character, they reveal character. And I think it can reveal that in those moments when you have a bad loss, when you have a great win, you can learn from how your heart interprets those and what the words you say. Are you saying nasty things? And you have all these opportunities to practice to respond in a way that is God honoring, that in this little microcosm of basketball where you experience so much drama on a regular basis, that when you have more critical moments in real life and in your spiritual life, you might have more experience in practicing dealing with those high emotions, and it can help prepare you for those times. So I feel like I've learned a ton about myself just through my fandom of sports. And when you are prayerful and thoughtful about that God can use that to sanctify you.
Oh my goodness. That is so good, Jake. Oh, I want to end there, but I am going to just share this one little story. So when I was in college, my freshman year, I went to Nyack. I went to New York. The college that my dad was at was in Minnesota. And I was dating a guy on the team from Nyack. And he was the best player. I always like to date the best players. And we always had this all alliance tournament where the Nyack would play Crown, where my dad was at. So that happened to be that year, and it was in Minnesota. And I went to the game, and I was like, I'm really, really like this boyfriend. Maybe even thought I was in love with him. Ugh, glad that didn't work out. But anyway, I'm there cheering. Nyack's crowd was amazing. It was so fun to go to their games, and we would cheer for him. So I'm there, I'm cheering on Nyack. And about 3 minutes into the game, all of a sudden, something switched, and I hated Nyack. And I went over and I sat by the Crown College fans. Didn't know most of the people on their team. I mean, I knew some obviously from the year before, but I cheered against Nyack. I cheered for Crown. I cheered for my dad. And I think it was just such an example of I grew up in that gym. My body did all of those things at all of those games. My heart was so in it that even though I was dating a guy on the other team, had been cheering for them, once I was there, it's like all of those rituals and things. I just think this kind of is a good maybe example of how that is really ingrained in us.
Yeah,
and it was
sure.
so ingrained in me. I did not want Nyack to win. And I even almost thought maybe I'd break up with my boyfriend. That's how much I didn't like him. We did later, but not that night. But anyway, I don't know. What do you think? Do you think that kind of is a good example of those liturgies just getting into our body and coming out? And, it's because it's like you don't know you're even doing it.
I think that's an incredible example. Yeah, I think that's an incredible example how these liturgies in the general life that we live, in addition to in the church, how they shape us in ways that we don't even realize. And there's a lot of ways that with being a basketball fan, it's worth examining. And I think that this just shows the power of doing that.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you so much, Jake, for joining me.
Yeah, of course.
It's been so much fun to talk to you. And thank you to all of our listeners. And we'll see. This may be my one and only podcast, but maybe there will be more.
Yep.
How do I stop recording?